Recording on. There we go. Say that again. It's 7 o'clock on January 30th, 2025. I'm calling this meeting of the Shutesbury Conservation Commission to order. This meeting's being recorded. All right, how's everybody doing? Good. Bob's not here. He's coming, or at least he didn't tell me he wasn't going to come. Let's see. So let's give him a couple more minutes. Can the person with the name iPad identify themselves for the minutes?
Hi, I don't know what happened, Beth. It's Jim Martin. Somehow I lost my name at the bottom and I probably hit some button I didn't mean to.
That's fine. Now we know who you are. I was kind of hoping you were Bob, but I'm not we're Bob. We can start the meeting. Bob will just join in. All right, so first on our agenda, my cat is joining us. First on the agenda, comments from the chair. I don't really have any comments except that this meeting we're going to really try to focus on the regulations. So I just want to go through the first few items pretty quickly and try to get to the regulations. Our next meeting is February 13th, and that'll just be a regular meeting. So our next item on the agenda is to review and vote on the minutes from January 9th. I think Mateo sent out some revised ones just today or yesterday. So hopefully everybody got a chance to look at those. Does anybody have any comments or changes to the minutes? No? All right, then I'll take a motion to approve the minutes of January 9th.
So motion. Nope, there you go.
All right, second.
I'll second.
Okay, Con.
Aye.
Fox.
Aye.
Rowan.
Aye.
And Wilson. Aye. All right, great. Next on our agenda is the continued discussion about the certificate of compliance for 32 Lake Drive. And I think I sent around to everybody. I know I did the communication I had with Ms. Dobbs from the DEP. I sent her everything that she needed, and she responded that she thanked me, and she responded that that's what she needed, was just confirmation from the Conservation Commission. So she basically said that the license was going to be issued and was, had been approved. And in addition to that, I think I sent around the invoice and check that the applicant, so once that was completed, I think the whole process moved forward, and they actually issued the invoice to the applicant from the waterways program, and the applicant sent us a copy of the invoice and the check that was submitted. So I think, and the applicant has also submitted a Form 8B applying for a certificate of compliance. So does anybody have any questions or discussion about that? My recommendation is that, at this point we issue the complete certificate of compliance because it's clear that the Chapter 91 license has been issued, but we can discuss and people can comment. Anyone from the commission? No? Okay. Any comments from the public regarding this? Miriam?
Hi, thanks. In the past, the commission didn't issue it until there was proof of recording. Because
Wow.
once you issue it, there's no further role for the commission.
Yeah, I think at this point we are pretty satisfied that this is a done deal. So at least I am, but I am open to comments from the commission or anyone else.
I have a
Tom?
message. I have a message that Bob Douglas is waiting in the waiting room.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
So what I can do is pull up the certificate of compliance. Why don't we just review that? If I can figure out how to do it. Let's see, this one.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Bob.
Oh, good. Hi. Internet's been a little wonky. Just wanted to make sure you're hooked up.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, we hear you and we see you. And we're looking at the certificate of compliance for 32 Lake Drive. Can everybody see it? Yeah, can people
Yes,
see it?
we-
We can.
Okay, great. So this is the 8B certificate of compliance form. Pretty straightforward. It's just a simple form with all the info, and then I've checked off complete certification. And then I put C, attached statement of findings. So I think it's more important that we look at that. So that's all the form is. I'm not sure who's seen these forms before, but it's like, it's a 2-page form with an attachment for recording information. I'll just show you that too. So there's this attachment for the information when it gets recorded, but it's a pretty basic form. And then how do you get rid of the, there we go. So these are the findings that I think we should attach to the certificate of compliance. Similar to what was with the partial certificate of compliance, got a lot of the same information, just talking about what the notice of intent, what the work was proposed in the notice of intent. Then there was this change that was reflected in the partial certificate of compliance. So in 2022, the applicants determined that the proposed infiltration trench, which is special condition number 7, wasn't practicable. So they came up with an alternative that was approved. And it was in here, basically decided that it met the interests of the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw. So then the commission is certifying full compliance with number 7. And part of that means that attachment B that was included in the original order of conditions no longer exists. So there was a little change with stormwater, which was discussed in 2022. But I just want that reflected here too, because it's still something that shows up in the order of conditions. So it's important to have it here in case somebody goes to the registry and just sees this certificate of compliance. They need to see that that change was approved. Then this statement just says that the applicants got a certified statement from a professional engineer that the project was constructed in compliance with the order of conditions, and that the new stormwater situation, which they ended up doing some grading instead of a trench, meets the stormwater management needs of the site. And then the last statement is the commission hereby certifies that the applicants are in full compliance with all requirements and conditions for this order of conditions. So I think that gives a good summary of what's going on with the project and that everything was met. So that will go with the form. Does anybody have any questions on the form or the findings?
Beth,
Bob?
Beth, can you hear me?
Yep.
Is it too much of an intrusion to ask that in your findings that in your first paragraph where you talk about applying for a dock license that one has been approved?
We can add that to the end where it's saying, that the commission hereby certifies that the applicants are in full compliance with all requirements and conditions of the order conditions, and then we can say, including, approval of a chapter
Gotcha.
91 license.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Bob, your hand up. Bob? Oh, I think he froze. Oh,
Yeah, I just wonder
Bob?
if there were any ongoing conditions for the project. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep, now I can hear you. No, this, when the partial certificate of compliance was issued, the only ongoing condition was getting the chapter 91 license. So, a lot of this, the text that's in these findings is taken from the findings that were included in the partial certificate of compliance. And the only thing that wasn't included in the partial certificate of compliance was the chapter 91. So there's no outstanding conditions. They had a professional engineer approve that it was constructed in accordance with the order. Okay,
Great, thank you very much.
yep. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing that so I can see. Okay. So if there's no more comments from the commission or from the public, I look for a motion to issue the certificate of compliance for 32 Lake Drive.
I so move.
All right, second.
I second.
Okay, Con,
Aye.
Good night.
Rowan,
Aye.
Mayor?
Yeah. So, being new, I'm questioning whether I should be part of this, as I wasn't part of any of the original site visits. Like, I kind of thought that you were handling this and that we didn't have to vote on it. So, I'm not sure if I should be part of it because I wasn't present
Yeah,
for any site visits. I didn't participate in any of the conversation. Like, you know what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? So,
yeah,
I-
no, and it's completely up to you. If you feel like
okay,
that, then that's fine. You can abstain.
I'll abstain. Thanks.
Okay. Douglas. Oh, I think he's gone.
Gone.
I don't see him anymore. Let's give him a minute.
Does anyone have his cell number? You might call him.
Yeah.
Maybe Tom can text him.
I'll text.
Yeah, I can text him too. Oh,
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 okay.
that's not, oh, here he is. He's back. You there, Bob? I see you.
Yes, I'm back. I hope you can hear me. I lost audio from your side. So anyway, am I okay now?
Yeah, yeah. We were just voting on issuing the certificate of compliance. Everybody had voted and I was looking for your vote.
Douglas, aye.
Okay, Wilson, aye. All right. Thank you very much. I'll be sending that 8B form out to you early next week, and then it needs to be recorded at the registry. And so does the license, the Chapter 1 license.
Yes, we'll take care of those, and thank you and the members of the commission for sticking with us through this arduous process. Appreciate it very much, and best of luck for the rest of the term.
Okay, and be sure to send us copies of the registry when things are recorded.
Yeah, we'll send.
I just had a quick question. Today's the 15th, the last day to have that issue. Does voting on that count? I just want to make sure that there's not a rug pull that.
Oh, it'll be, they should date it today, so.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Okay,
All right, thanks.
good night, folks.
Bye, good night. All right. Next on our agenda is review and vote on CPA grant applications. Scott has done a wonderful job putting together an application. Penny helped with one too. So there's two that we're thinking of bringing forward to the CPA. I'm gonna let Scott tell you all about it.
All right. Thanks, Beth. Wonder if I should, I've never shared my screen here, but would it be helpful to share the grant application, Beth, just to walk through?
Yeah, can you share, or do I have to give you some
It
kind of
says
power?
host disabled participant screen sharing. I could just talk about it too. Maybe that's easier. I
No,
defer.
I just made you host, so that means you can share your co-host or whatever.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
All right,
Doc,
let's see.
could you do it as interpretive dance?
Maybe if you're lucky. Can you see my screen? Okay, the application.
Yep.
Okay. Well, here we go. So the first CPA or CPC application that we had, in this one, I know we have Penny here in the meeting as well, and so I'll invite her to add more to this as she would like, and really this is really reflecting all her hard work establishing the top of the lake conservation area that we have here in town, and this grant application is really designed to improve that. For those of you who have never been there before, this is on the north end of Lake Wyola. It's a small pocket park, and with some parking there and access to the lake that was really designed for folks who would like to have canoe or kayak, that they could carry that in and launch there. Unfortunately, on the banks of Lake Wyola in this location, there's quite a lot of glossy buckthorn, which is an invasive species that has gained a hold there, and really not only is it not good for the ecosystem health of the lake, but it's also impedes recreation there, as it serves as a barrier between the lawn area and the lake. And so what this application is seeking to do, I'll get right to it, is it's asking for a total project cost of $4,500. So it's a pretty small application, 4,000 of CPA being requested with a matching contribution from the commission of 500. And what this represents is a contract here to control the glossy buckthorn with the 4,000, and then the matching contribution of 500 from the commission is to purchase native shrubs and vegetation. that would be ours to go ahead and reestablish in this location once the buckthorn is controlled. So that's it in a nutshell for this one, but I think we've applied for both open space and recreation. But with permission from the chair, I would invite Penny to add anything more that she had to this application.
Yeah, that's fine. It does say $45,000 instead of 4,500 right there in that box.
Yeah, that would be I'm sorry, that's the typo there.
Might want to fix that one before it goes to.
Yeah.
But yes, Penny, please.
So I put in the $500 from the commission, thinking that you would want to discuss that tonight. From pricing out plants at New England wetland plants, I don't think it will be that much, but I put that much in just to be on the safe side. And I also don't think that it will cost $4,000 for Brian Colleran's work. He put in a very padded amount, and you should discuss whether you feel comfortable submitting at that level.
Yeah, I would just add thanks, Penny. From my standpoint, I think this seems reasonable. It's a small area. I don't know. Buckthorn is difficult to get rid of, and whether or not there could be more than one effort to subdue it before we establish native vegetation. This seemed reasonable to me, but I think that's really for the commission here to talk about and decide. So did we want to talk about these individually, Beth, and talk about this one first and then move on, or would you like me to talk about the other applications as well?
Well, let's finish talking about this one, I think, and then do the other one. I just for a little more detail, so the 4,000 is will probably be contracted to Brian Colleran, is that his name? And then the 500 is our match, which, so you're thinking that that's buying of plants to replant and then us doing the physical effort of replanting. Is that the plan?
Yes, yes. So I know I did get an estimate from Brian. He said, and I didn't really know how to fill out the form based on what he said because it doesn't quite mesh with the categories here, but he estimated it would be $2,000 to come out here, visit the site, and develop a plan. And then another $2,000 for multiple times to work on subduing the the buckthorn. He listed, I think, 4 different trips. And so I'm not sure that should really be under supplies. Maybe it should be under other.
Right. Yeah, I think it looks good still. Would he be sort of putting together sort of a little application for the Conservation Commission to be doing the work?
Well, that's not included in here. I thought I think we would get a volunteer to do the paperwork for whatever the commission requires. The buckthorn is right on the bank. And I know the bank is considered a resource area, so you would have to decide what you wanted to do with that, which set of paperwork.
Okay. Bob, I see your hand up.
Yeah, quick question. Is that parcel town open space or is it in the care and custody of the commission?
It's property owned by the town that is managed by the Conservation Commission.
But I
So
think it is considered conservation land, right? In terms of,
Conservation land, yes, but it was, I'm trying to think. I think it was actually, I think this one was purchased by the Conservation Commission with your, the trust fund money.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right. I think I'm good with the application. What other people have comments?
Um,
I just wanted to say, if it is padded a little bit, as was said, I think that's okay because really costs are just going up on everything. From year to year, it's astounding. So I think building is, is probably a practical idea.
All right.
The only comment I have, it seems like the category of funding, I'd put it all under contractual for the $4,000 if you're hiring a contractor to do the planning and the work. Whatever supplies he does would fall into that. Right?
Yeah, I guess so. I was, I wasn't sure. I deferred to the commission on this.
I think that's a great edit. Dan, I think we could make that and while this may be a little high, we'll take the extra 0 out of the top.
Thank you. And so I filled this application out. Scott, can you scroll to the end
Yep.
and see if you're comfortable with what I put in there for who's actually applying? I put you, that's what I did.
Yeah, I think you had me right.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make
Authorized.
sure you were okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I would defer to the chair, but I think.
Yep. No,
And
that's fine.
I'm certainly willing to help make sure this happens, to work with Scott on that, but it seems since it's Conservation Commission property that it should be submitted under the umbrella of the commission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's fine. It's good.
Do you want to roll on to the other ones, Beth?
Yeah, I think if we're done with this one, if nobody's got any more comments, and yeah, we'll look at the next one.
All right. Just by way of history, several years ago, there was an assessment. The commission actually had CPA funding to do an assessment of our Southbrook conservation area. And a few of us that were on the commission, after this assessment was done, had a chance to walk the trails and look at some of these areas. I think the headline that I would share there are several places here in Southbrook, and you can see this is it's really 2 parcels, and I'll get to that here in the application. But this portion here, right around where the coming from the town beach, and then connecting down to this north portion of Southbrook down into this southerly portion here that kind of goes along Wendell Road. There are several locations here in this assessment that showed deficiencies in the trail. A lot of places where there's the trail goes through resource areas, places where there's inadequate bridging there, bridges that have been graffitied and are not accessible here, or kind of makeshift crossings, and some degradation here from trail use going through wetland areas where we think we could either reroute the trail and or put down additional bog bridging. So this assessment was done, but there was no money put in to actually implement any of the recommended changes. And so I have two proposals here for consideration from the commission, and both being put in for open space and recreation. And I think we have a choice here. And I am recommending that we submit both of these for consideration. One is a project, after I'll get to, and I'll share that one first. Here we go. So these are the different lot numbers here for the Lake Wyola Town Beach section. It was acquired in the mid-60s, and then the South Brook, both owned by the town here and both managed by the Conservation Commission. And they're reflected on that map that I showed you. The first one that I thought would be good for us to talk about is a proposal here. Actually, maybe I had it at the top. There we go. Where we would recommend a full funding amount for this project. This would be a design build to actually hire a contractor to design the bog bridging, design the trail reroute, and then implement those. I did get I contacted a couple different consultants that were referred to me from Kestrel, folks that they've used before, just to get an idea of what the scope of this work might cost. And that was reflected here. They estimated about $72,900 of cost to do the design build. I have also identified about $8,700 of matching contributions that I wanted to review with the commission here. So I'm going to skip to that part of the application. And what that consists of, again, I have $72,900 for contractual. This would be the design build part. And then here I have other funds from the commission that would be put as match. Part of this is personnel, and this would be efforts of the commission and volunteers to do the blazing here of the trails. And so that was a deficiency that was found. I think that's something we could do as a commission and or with volunteer labor from neighbors and others that I think would be interested in helping to blaze these trails. And so that's represented here by the $5,700. I have $3,000 of contractual from the commission, and this would be for the purchase of signage that would be put up here to for the trails that were recommended. And so that would represent the total. So this is one application, all taking place just to review how that would happen. Here I have a timeline that in the spring of 2025, we would, part of our contribution would be hiring some of the wetland delineations. That's part of the work there that would take place so that we could complete our own relative determinations and help issue the design build here so that they would know where the resource areas were so they could design around that. That we would, the contractor would just complete their design work here this summer. We would get all of our relative permits, and then in the fall, the contractor would complete this trail work, install all the wetland crossings. We would do the repainting of the bridge and blazing the trails with us and volunteers, purchase the sign, and the highway department would install it. So this is kind of in a nutshell, one fell swoop getting all the deficiencies done in 1 year. The second proposal is a phased approach where the same project cost, although we're only requesting half the amount from CPA. And kind of the timeline for that is a little bit different. And then thinking about how we could divide this up, that we would complete the our work there with the delineations. We would issue a bid and design build here for the total design. But they, and that would be for the whole project, but the build would really focus on the southern portion. You know, this part that I shared here, it would focus on this part here because this location does not have any of the large bog bridging that was designed for up here, and that's where a substantive amount of the costs are. So they would do the whole design, but they would only do half of the building. They start from the south and work their way north to complete as much as they could. And we would do the repainting of the bridge and blaze the trails and purchase the signs. Actually, I want to make sure I have the right one up here. So they would complete all the work here in the trail work on the southern portion. We would repaint the bridge and blaze the trails here. And then the signs would be purchased and installed in year 2 under a separate grant application. So we'd be really dividing this up. In summary, in the year 1 and under this grant, likely we could probably get a full design done. We'd get a partial build, and we'd need to then seek additional funding in year 2 to complete the work. And so these are 2 applications. I guess my thought in doing it this way and submitting maybe both through CPA, although I defer to the rest of the commission, that this would give CPA some options to think about here in the looking at the totality of the projects and what they thought they could fund. They might, you know, I think funding it all at once makes sense if there's money to do so, although this gives an option for partial funding. So maybe I'll stop there and see if there's questions or anything more, Beth, you want to add, or questions from the commission?
Yeah, I think submitting both applications is a good idea. I'm the rep for the Conservation Commission on the CPA, and you know, it really is so much about the money in the different accounts and what other applications come in, and what the CPA, how they feel they can fairly distribute, you know, the funds this year. So giving them the option of giving us, you know, a lesser amount this year, I think is it's a good idea. I think it's kind of a nice thing to do for them, but it helps us too. I was wondering about, so the match, are we splitting that for the 2 different years too? Like,
Yeah,
so what you're submitting with the one that was half and was just 2025 with kind of half the work. Well, what are we going to do with the match? I guess that gets a little confusing.
Yeah, it is a little confusing. What I figured is for here, that we would do at least the delineations here for the planned trail work. And so I think that would be focusing on the southern portion. I've tried to reserve some of the match for a previous or for a subsequent application. Same for the, you know, the blazing here, that we could go ahead and do that for repainting the bridge and blazing the trails. But the signs, like the actual sign and the purchase and installation of the sign, is a big amount of the match, and that would be under a separate grant application.
That would be next year, twenty
That
twenty-six.
would be 2026 or a future grant. It's not represented here in.
So the five, I'm just looking at the money. So this year's match total. So wait, go up, I guess. The match total of $5,000 is, that's
Yep.
just this year. So,
That's just this year, and this is how it's broken down.
I see.
Us removing the white blazes, all the stuff for year one. So wetland delineation of about 10 hours that we would do, there's permitting here, and I have that represented. Having new blazing here that we would start and on the southern portion, because that's the part that's going to be worked on and see how far we can get. But I have 16 hours represented here of doing that, repainting the bridge. And then in year two would be the purchase and installation of the new signs.
Okay.
So I really didn't know how to reflect a phased application in this. It's not really geared towards that, but that's.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all good. My one concern is the delineation and permitting, because the Concom itself can't do the delineation and the permitting because we review delineations and permitting. So it would be,
We'd be hiring.
we'd be hiring someone, and I'm wondering if that's enough money. I guess 3,000 for permitting. And it can be the same person who's doing the delineation and permitting. And that's probably a pretty good number, actually, for that. Okay. I think it's all good.
I do have a question, Scott. Well, I guess I have a couple.
Yeah.
One is there adequate parking anywhere to cover this for people that are coming from away? I never park. I just walk, so.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jan. And I was talking with Mateo a little bit and some others about potential for the future. And I could see, ideally, what I would love to see is under year one, we get all this work done. So all these trails are blazed and safe and well signed. And aren't going through resource areas. There is parking there at right by the boat ramp, which is the overall parking. That's really and there's where the sign is, where there could be some improvements made for parking in that location, right?
Out. Yeah.
That pull off there. Ideally, it would be great to think about additional parking that could be done. I know. We've talked about the potential too of maybe creating an accessible trail that would go from that parking at the boat ramp to the town beach. I would love to see that done, but those aren't reflected in this grant right now. It's just parking at that main parking at the boat ramp, and then you'd have the rest of these trails to connect to.
And so that leads me to my next question, which we're going to blaze the trails that exist and maybe phase out or whatever some of the less desirable trails. Have we got a direct connection to Wendell Road in this process?
When you say a direct connection, what do you mean?
So is a blaze trail going to take us at some point to Wendell Road?
It does right now. Yes, that would be in this location.
Okay, and so that's part of what the improvement will include?
The blazings would be
Yeah.
what we would do. These trails are, some sections of them are, from hiking it, they're blazed, but they're poorly blazed.
Right.
And so this is really, the blazing is just, reestablishing the sections that would have to be rerouted and the existing trail, but it does go down past Wendell Road.
And so you said in the in the phase version, we'd work our way north towards the lake.
Yeah,
In the bigger 1 year version, are the lake trails covered?
yes. Yeah, the reason why, if you look at some of these large bog bridges, like in photo 3, and you know, from this location, Jan, where this is, but that's up here. This is the spot where there are a bunch of pretty sizable bog bridging,
Yeah.
and that represented over half of the $79,000 estimate from the contractor were for those large bog bridges.
I see.
So that's the reason why I was suggesting, well, we just start in one location, try to finish as much as we can. Again, my personal recommendation is I'd rather see the full amount done. I think it will be cheaper and less headache. I'm a little concerned about doing the design from one contractor and then having to rebid it in a subsequent year when changes contracting and the rest of it could be different and have a different contractor potentially installing it. But I was just trying to find a way to
put a smaller
divide.
price tag on. I get it. I really appreciate the both versions. I would way prefer to get the whole thing done in one shebang, if that could be possible.
I had a question. Could you go over, I was actually a little disoriented as to where everything went. I didn't realize the trail went all the way kind of south before it connected to that sharp curve on Wendell. But could you go over 17, 18, 19? Because that is just the worst part of that trail. And could you say what's going to be done there? Because
Yeah,
even on a good day, when there hasn't been any rain, it's largely impassable, that area.
I agree. I think so again, just for disclaimer, this was the assessment that was done previously, and these are some high level recommendations, but I don't know that all of these, when we actually get designed, are what actually is what's going to be needed here. But you can see this is what you're talking about here with this existing bridge, and then it comes down and they have these, there are rock stepping stones, but you can see where we have there are bikes, there are there's heavy foot traffic. It says here at the time there's ORV tracks. So this is the part that you're talking about being impassable, and I would agree. People walk across these stepping stones, but they're all kind of sinking. So what he recommended here was an upland reroute. I'm not sure that there's really a whole lot of room there to reroute it without hitting a resource area, honestly, Mayor. But I think that that's part of the design build that we'd have to see. Like this could be bog bridging that's really needed here as well.
Right. Yeah, I didn't understand what upland reroute meant, like, because I wasn't clear where you meant upland, like, because there's just a short period. I mean, there's a short to the kind of, I
Right.
guess the south
The
is like
brook is right
a
here.
higher area right along that brook. But
Right.
actually I was actually on the other side where that person is. But when you get through that first initial part, and then actually I see what you're saying. The picture's reversed. We're heading
Right.
back up
Yeah.
towards Locks Pond. Okay.
There
So
might be a way through here.
right. Okay, that's what I was wondering, if that's what you meant. But it's after that initial section where all this brush is kind of, or this mountain laurel, I think it is, past there, and then there's another section after that
Yeah.
that's just
Right
as bad.
here.
Yeah,
Right here.
and I just didn't know, like, what, I mean, because
The trail's been rerouted here already, kind of
yeah,
in more of the upland.
okay.
Again, Mayor, I think you're pointing out the real need to do some work here.
Right.
And I think this would be, you know, again, what we're recommending would be to implement, you know, to take a look at this. This is a quick and dirty assessment. This is not a design. This is just
Right, no,
walking
I
through with pictures. But this is what we really need now, is to take this, look at design, and then implement it.
right.
Penny, you
job.
have your hand up?
Yes, well, I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. Scott, can you go back to the map? And this goes back to a question a minute ago. When you look at the area between spot 19 and 21, the trail actually goes off of the South Brook property there. And so that's something that will need to be addressed.
Yeah.
And then I will just say that there's never been any direct management by the commission on the South Brook portion of this property. All the trails that are there are user-made trails. There may be completely better places than where they are now. So hopefully when you do a trail assessment and a design, you'll consider that. And who knows, the trail system may look quite different than what you see now. But certainly that spot that goes off the South Brook property needs to be sorted out, because does it really hit Wendell Road as 21? Does the property?
It does. I mean,
The
this
deal
is
trail.
all Russ
Yeah.
Greco's land here. I do think there is another potential that the commission walked through here, and you're right, Penny. I think this is part of the conversation to see what the wishes of everyone might be and would we need to reroute this. There's also a fair amount of waters coming off of Wendell Road and washing across the trails that's on this property and making it impassable here too. And this bridge is really quite bad there. So there's work. If I had 21
Yeah.
here, there's right here in this location, this
Mhm.
bridge is in very poor shape. It's used by snowmobilers. I think that's the other thing that we're going to have to work on, is with some of the old club, to make sure whatever we're building is passable. But then this is also all wet in here, and it's coming right off of Wendell Road. This is the looking from Wendell Road, the trailhead, and they have here no parking. This is on private property. This is on where you're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that bridge the one that got replaced
No,
by Evan?
that one is further up the other way. Let's see, to get disoriented here. I think it's
I thought that was at 29, but maybe I'm wrong.
might boy, actually, no, you're right. It's that, I think it is 29. I'd know it if I saw it here. So it's not that one, but I think it is 29. Yeah, this one. This one get replaced.
Yeah.
Which is good. It wasn't in very good shape.
Be nice to get all those shingles that somebody dumped about 15 years ago at that trailhead out of there too.
Yeah.
All right, well,
So
that's great.
I had one more comment, and that
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of money, but I really feel like doing this all at once will save you money in the long run. And it'll be a wonderful thing to have this. Scott, I don't know if you've done this, but I would add to your proposal that from the open space plan, residents in town say they want trails they know they can walk on that are well marked and safe, and that there's parking nearby. And I think emphasizing that early on in your your proposal is great. And the last thing I'll say is the CPC said when they gave us the little tiny grant, which was, I think, only something like $3,000 to do this preliminary assessment. They said that was the assessment and then come back and ask for money to do the improvement. So I don't know what they're going to say if you try and break up the improvements into 2 more grants, but that will be for them to decide.
Yeah, no, you raised a really good point, Penny. It does ask here how this will fulfill general and specific evaluation criteria and the community preservation plan. And so we did try to lay out, as you said, having these diverse trail opportunities and efficient use of existing land, all were called out. And I think this trail does, or this proposal does try to facilitate all of those goals.
Great. And thanks so much for making this happen.
Thanks, Penny.
I see Tracy McNaughton has her hand up.
Hi, thanks for calling on me. This is awesome. I'm really excited about these trails getting cleaned up because it's a really pretty little area. One of the things I'm just a little confused about is that I know a couple years ago when there was discussion about the boat launch and, motorized and passive launching, Donna McNichol separated out both areas and said that, if I remember correctly, was saying that snowmobiling shouldn't be allowed on these trails because it was only for passive because of the type of grant that was used to get it. And I'm fine with the snowmobiling because my understanding is that when you're snowmobiling on, you're not damaging the ground because you're on the snow. But I just wanted to you were talking about snowmobiling and making the trails, passable, and I was just a little confused about that. Was that all cleared up? That's why that's my question.
I think it's a great question, Tracy. My understanding is it's a little bit confusing too. When we talked about it here before, I know we had people taking motorized access down, people driving and coming off the lake and driving down, and I see Miriam's hand up, so I'm sure she'll have more to add, but they were driving there. My recollection when we talked about this with the town's attorney is that the snowmobile access was allowed, but it was the other types of driving that wasn't. But
well, she had said in that meeting that snowmobiling wasn't allowed, but my reading of the rules was that snowmobiling is allowed. So that's where it was confusing. I never heard anything about that since. So I agree with you. It does seem like snowmobiling is allowed. I just know the attorney said you should take the signs down and it's not allowed at that meeting. So, but maybe.
Can I comment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you can, Miriam. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's up to the discretion of the commission to establish what the rules are. I think that the self-help grant regulations will allow snowmobiling, but it doesn't mean they have to allow it. And I missed, I was logged in here, but I had to leave the room for a little while and I didn't hear. Are you doing anything to address the ATVs that are tearing up the trails? Was there any discussion about doing something about that earlier? That's not part of the plan.
Do you
we
want
haven't.
to? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say we didn't talk about that, Miriam, here. Although we have previously, as you know, we had installed some signage here that talked about what was allowed, and I think it says no motorized vehicles except for snowmobiles, and was the language that we worked on with town's attorney, and we had that up. But there's definitely more need of signage here. I think there are places where ATVs could be coming on and there isn't any signage and anything to tell them what they can and can't do. So from the standpoint of signage, I think that will help hopefully address concerns with ATVs, or at least letting people know that that wouldn't be allowed here.
Yeah, I think so. This application is just for actual, work to blaze trails and to do bridges and to just improve the trails. And then there's money for signage, but this is not having to do with the discussion of what's going to be on the signage. I think when we get to the point of getting the money and saying, okay, what kind of signs, what do we want? Do we want, maybe want some signs that are just arrows pointing, go in this direction, but then we also might want signs that have names for trails. And then we might have regulatory signs. We probably would, but we would have to have a discussion about that as to, whether we want to have them say what the current signs say, or maybe, maybe we'll vote to change the signage a little bit. But right now, this application is strictly just to go to the CPA and see if they'll fund this project. So it doesn't discuss regulations at all. It does mention trying to get some money for signage, but it doesn't talk at all about making any decisions as to what would be on the signs.
They're not talking about like any barriers. That this is not what the proposal is. That's what I was wondering about.
Barriers?
Yeah,
For-
like any kind of way of limiting what kind of vehicles can get onto the trails. Because that was something we had talked about a few years ago.
That's not in the proposal, right, Scott?
Okay.
No. We
Okay.
could always, I think there's room here and working with the highway department to look at that. I think part of it, Miriam, we really need a better layout here for some of the trails. I think a lot of things come in here. This isn't, as Penny pointed out, this isn't even owned by the commission.
Yeah.
And so like I think it needs to be a comprehensive plan to address, the rerouting, what we laid out here in the plan, but you raised great points and there's more work to be done, but this is just taking that first bite after the assessment.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. Any more comments from the commission on it's really 3 CPA applications that we'd like to bring forward coming from the commission to the CPA committee. Scott, when are the applications due? February something?
I think they're due on the 6th, aren't they?
The 6th, yeah. So I guess we'd like to vote tonight on whether the commission wants to bring the 3 of them forward. I guess as Scott said, there's the option for Southbrook, just submitting the one that's for all the money. Seems to me like a good idea to provide CPA with the option, but I don't know what other people think.
Do we want to prioritize them?
It's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean,
Good idea.
it seems like I've hiked the one out from many times, the one out from the boat launch, and so many times I've gotten lost with my kids because it just isn't clear as to where it goes. And then there's a hill and then this and that. And I'm like, we just end up going whatever way we can to get back up and climbed up really, up onto that last trail that, comes out, where 17, 18, 19 are. But, I've never met anybody out there. And as opposed to, the other trail, 17, 18, 19, that whole section, at any given day I could meet somebody out there because it's more heavily traveled. And that's not to say that the other one shouldn't be prioritized because maybe people just don't know about it. A lot of people, the boat launch is just a very, my property butts up against conservation land and down, and the Randall Road. And, I know how many people go up and down there. I hear them with their boats. I hear them go up and down, but it's pretty busy down there, is if people can get down there even in the winter, because it's not maintained, they will. There's been people that have lived down there. It's you know, it's a very busy area. And so I don't know, I'm kind of torn because knowing that, that is a natural way to hike out from the gazebo and that whole section. But it would be great if it did. I see the way it's connected, but that's not like when you kind of go up these hills, you kind of get lost and it doesn't make sense as to how it connects. But it'd be nice if it did connect directly at a different, like a lower portion of that other trail where, 17, 18, 19. But I don't know. I'm kind of torn because like I said, a lot of people go to the boat launch. I never see anybody hiking out from from there, but a lot of people hike out that trail, but there's no parking there. So, um, you know, yeah. So like, yeah, 1 through 14, and then it connects to 25. That's, from 10 to 25, you never know. Like, didn't know. It just something gets lost in that section. But
This is confusing, and this map
yeah.
isn't even right, because the property lines aren't correct on this map. This does go through conservation land,
Uh-huh.
and I hike this pretty routinely,
Yep.
around the lake and then down here. This all does connect through here, but you're absolutely right, Mayor. It's super confusing. And there are a lot of other routes and trails that people have developed.
Mhm.
I think you're really pointing out the need to make it more clear so people can really use it
Right.
effectively than they can right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's kind of, instead of a hike, it's a lot of days more like a wander.
Yeah. And it's pretty much off limits. Like, the first parts of that, like 1 through 13, are kind of off limits, and like in kind of mud season, because
Right.
you got to jump to get into this, or you got to jump to get to that.
Right.
But
We have all
um
these
mhm.
to go through, but it is I mean, every part of this unit is truly beautiful. There are some awesome views here along the way, and I think this really builds. It's not very far away from some of the Brightwater Bog and some of the work that Kestrel's been doing there. I know there are lots of opportunities here too to really enhance the surrounding areas and trails. But you're right. We need to make this more clear so people can use it.
I don't know. So I maybe just go for everything,
Hey,
all
Scott, I
in.
think if you added a line in there that suggested these improvements would help link the South Brook trails to the bog, that would be a nice enhancement.
Yeah, they don't actually. I thought about that.
It's not far though.
They're not far. They don't actually touch. You have to hike down Wendell Road.
I know, but that's the link is there, and it's a nice link if you really wanted to go for a good walk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've done such a great job too. It would be lovely if some of that could be part of this as well. You know what I mean? Because it has to be elevated at different times because it's just not passable. I've gone through there with a stroller regularly, and it does not work. Even an umbrella stroller does not work going through there. It's hard. It's hard. I end up like carrying it with my grandson in it. So, but yeah, I think everything should be all in, like if we can, to get the whole thing looked at.
Yeah, I agree. Bob, you got your hand up?
Yeah, Madam Chair, may I make a motion?
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we submit for the CPA with the whole project related to the trail we've been recently reviewing as our top priority.
Okay, so that can be number one, and then do we want number two to be sort of the split up version of Southbrook, or do we want it to be the top of the lake as sort of number two, and then number three would be the split up version of Southbrook?
I like that.
Speaking strictly for myself, I would say the split up version as the second tier.
Southbrook's important, yeah.
I'm inclined to go the other way. I'm inclined to put top of the lake in the middle. It's a small project and it's doable, and it would be good to get that crap out of there and grow the right stuff, you know.
And I will say that I was specifically contacted by the CPC to put in a proposal for that. So that's the only reason it's here.
Right, you had to give back some money, right?
Well, I had to give back $200.
Yeah, but you know, so
And I was told that instead I should instead of using that money as seed money for the remediation of the buckthorn, that they requested that a full proposal go in.
All right, so we've got two different motions on the table here. How do other folks feel? Scott, Mayor?
I think I'd be inclined to do, I do think doing Southbrook all as one makes the most sense. And I have concerns about the implementation of breaking it up. I think it could make it more complicated and maybe more expensive in the long run. So I like doing that first. I like doing top of the lake and getting that done. It's a small project, different than the trail work. And then the phased for consideration, maybe as a third tier.
Okay. Mayor?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Scott, but I don't know. I guess I would go for the Southbrook one, you know, first, the whole thing, and then conservation. I mean, then the top of the lake second. I know there's parking there, but maybe I'm missing something. I don't usually see people there, but could be the time of day. I mean, I don't know, but I think there's an opportunity to add to Southbrook and make it even, you know, more welcoming. Like people could park at the boat launch or Randall Road and you know, hike all the way over to the Janowitz, you know, the Kestrel Land Trust property, and then back, you know. I mean, that's we're all the way around the lake, and then, you know, but there is parking available there that could take you on a wide variety of trails and then back to Randall Road. So
All right, well, I think I'm hearing that our first choice would be the Southbrook with the total cost, and then our second is top of the lake, which is a little bit smaller ask, so maybe that's a good one to have in there second. And then our third would be the split between FY25 and FY26 for Southbrook.
Yeah.
Okay, motion for that?
I make a motion for that.
All right, second?
I second.
Okay. Con,
Aye.
Douglas,
Aye.
Rowan,
Aye.
Fox,
I
and Wilson. Aye. All right, great. I think the next thing to happen with that is I get to present them at the CPA meeting because Scott can't be there. So that will be the next, and I'll let everybody know how that goes. My cat has been enjoying this whole meeting.
We've been enjoying your cat too.
She loves to watch TV and follow the mouse, go all around the screen. She's very, all right, so next on the agenda is the regulations. Watch out, kitty. There's that.
Does Tracy show up her hand up from?
Yep, I think she just put her hand up. Tracy?
Oh, hold on, sorry. Yeah, I have to get going, so I just wanted to just bring this up before I went. I probably should have brought it up when you were talking about the what what you're going to be doing at the passive boat launch over on Merrill. Are you aware that the police department is planning on putting a boat dock for their boat in that area? Apparently they're getting a boat dock donated to them by an anonymous donor. And last night at the boat safety meeting, she said that they were putting it in there.
Off of Randall Road down
No,
there?
Merrill.
Oh.
I know that Becky Torres asked about that when I was on the commission. And I said they could propose that, but they would have to go through quite a bit of permitting. And that was the last I heard of that.
Well, this was just last night, so you might want to check into it.
Yeah, thanks for letting us know. We will definitely, I'll reach out to the current town administrator, see what's going on.
So what
Good
would
night,
that entail, Tracy, since you know
Oh,
that?
I don't know. I mean, it was just, I was just there as a listener on the meeting.
Mhm.
And the police chief was answering questions of the committee.
Okay.
And that's what she said was
Yeah.
happening. An anonymous person had donated a dock and that they were going to be putting it basically, right, off of that, near Bob Carey's,
Mhm.
using the town property there to access it. So basically parking it there for the summer.
It makes a lot more sense than what she was initially planning. Was she wanted to do right at Randall Road, right off the gazebo, and have a dock that went all the way out, like halfway across that kind of shallow end, but that there were so many permits that were involved in that, from what she was saying, when that she must have backed off on that. So come up with an easier plan that's like right there, so that
Yeah.
makes
Well,
sense.
yeah, I mean, she may not be aware that it's conservation land. So that.
Yeah, well, I'll look into it.
Okay.
Conservation land, wetland permitting, all that. So thanks for the tip.
You're welcome. Good night.
Good night. All right. Who's disabled? Kitty, move. All right. All right, back to the regulations. I think I'm going to start with the docks and piers section. Because that was something we started, but then we skipped ahead. All right, just saw it. Title 5. Docks and piers. All right, so I sent out this version to everybody. And I think in this preamble, I just moved some paragraphs around. Didn't add anything new, just kind of move some things around. So we talk about chapter 91, we talk about natural heritage. We say that Lake Whale is a great pond, all very important. So the requirements of licensing dock, piers, and floats on the Lake Whale are regulated by the Waterways Program, which requires an order of conditions or a determination by the commission before the license can be issued, unless the project is otherwise subject to exemptions included in the chapter 91 program. And then that the Lake Waiwola and portions of the watershed have historically been designated or mapped with natural heritage. So projects in these areas need to have natural heritage review prior to an order of conditions being issued. And this is all language that was in there. So that what's crossed out there, I had moved up to the top.
You might want to go back to 10.1.3. You got a typo.
Oh,
The last line, I think it's plant productivity, not plan
Yes,
productivity.
shading of underlying vegetation and adverse effects. Yes, plant.
Also, I've got one more question on that. If you go back up, it says blah 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 blah. It's like the third line of 10.1.3, cumulative effects on for water dependent uses in close proximity to each other, but close proximity isn't defined.
Mm,
And that's sort of an issue around the lake because we have some lots that are quite narrow.
should we say something like multiple structures for water dependent use within the same parcel have potential to degrade resource areas? Because like you're saying, the shorelines are very short,
It's
so
not necessarily one parcel. It could be you and your neighbor and another neighbor if you've all got narrow lots. But we don't define it, so it gets a little squishy.
right, that's why I was trying to figure out a way to define it.
Well, I mean, part of the trouble that I was reading into it was, I think they want 15 feet or something between 15 feet from your property line, but if you've got a rocky shoreline or some situation where the access is closer than 15 feet and that would be more of a disturbance to move it, you know what I mean? I don't know, I had a little trouble with the proximity issue. Because you've got to use common sense here. Maybe as appropriate, proximity as appropriate or something like that would allow us a little bit of wiggle room where people can't.
Beth, could I make a comment?
Yeah, one thing is, to me, just like with all applications, we can't control or really look at neighboring properties. We deal with the project that is proposed within the property that it's proposed. So when we're saying close proximity, we can really only legally look at that within the same parcel. That's the way I understand the regulations. We can't start looking at other parcels, so we can't really say, oh, you put your dock, and and we're seeing more impact on the values of the Wetlands Protection Act because it's so close to your neighbor's dock. Because in a way, then we're looking at the neighbor's property too, and that's not really legal. You're just looking at a project that's proposed within a particular parcel. So I think really the only close proximity we can look at is within the confines of one parcel.
Okay, I mean, that helps clarify it.
Yeah. Miriam?
Yeah, 2 points. One is, this isn't a performance standard. This is in preamble. So this is not a requirement that the commission is now bound to. It's basically a scientific observation about the impact of development on resource areas. And it isn't taking away the commission's discretionary authority. But it's just common sense that you have development close to each other, could be a cumulative impact. The other piece is that if you look at the language of the Wetlands Protection Bylaw, it does define the scope for looking at cumulative impact, including looking at development outside of the project area. And the commission does have the authority to look broadly at how patterns of development are affecting resource areas. That's in the plain language of the bylaw. So I just would recommend that you take a look at that passage in the bylaw, because it is different perhaps than the Wetlands Protection Act.
Yeah, it might be different than the Wetlands Protection Act. Yeah, so I kind of agree with Miriam in that this is just the preamble. So it isn't really requiring anything. It is just a general discussion on the commission looking at cumulative effects, kind of in general. Does that make sense, Jan?
I can accept that.
Okay.
There's more than one 10.1.3.
The numbering's gonna have to be fixed very much as we go through, like when this is all done, the formatting and the numbering is all gonna have to be looked at. All right, does anybody have any other comments on the preamble?
Just 10.1.6, the commission encourages landowners to obtain a Chapter 91 as appropriate. The regulations, we're just following the regulations.
Oopsie. All right, is this not? It's not showing it as a change. Oh, there we go, now it is. Okay. All right, definitions.
Oh, I had one more thing there. Were we at
Yep.
definitions?
Yep.
Yeah, it was in definitions. I mean, I don't know if it makes any difference. 10.2.4, we identify November 1st as the date you pull out a seasonal pier. And that's traditional, that's fine. I was thinking about the future a little bit. If for some reason November 1st moves, we back it up or go forward, whichever way, because seasons change a little bit or need changes or something in the future. I was wondering if we wouldn't be better off to say November 1st or as lake drawdowns are scheduled, So
Yeah,
like
no,
we're not stuck on November 1st if it switches around a little.
oops. Is that answered by this addition where it says, based on the actual annual date set for raising and lowering of the lake level?
That was my thought. It's a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah. This was from something that you had you had sent,
Yeah.
comments on long ago.
Yeah.
Yep, nope, that's good. It's in there.
Okay.
All right, presumptions. Oops. Again, just some wordsmithing of things. Structure use.
So you got a typo on the third line of presumptions, presumed to affect. We're missing a two in there.
Shall be presumed to affect. Okay. Construction or use of water dependent structures such as the job shall be presumed to affect the values of adjacent resource areas, including but limited to the land under water bank, wetlands, and subject to flooding or it's rebuttable. Okay, yeah, that's just wordsmithing. Performance standards. The commission shall review a proposed dock, pier, walkway that is not a seasonal float, buoy, or swimming platform. Upon the submission of an NOI, such application shall include proof of submission to Natural Heritage for review if applicable and proof of Chapter 91 license application submission. The commission shall review seasonal boats, buoys, and swimming platforms under small project permit application. How do people feel about that?
I'm wondering if we want to keep 10.4.2. The thing that I see here that is kind of weird, we're after wetlands protection stuff. And Chapter 91 is about navigation and boating safety. Those aren't the same thing.
Mhm.
So when you look at buoys, for example, I am hard pressed to think that we're establishing something damaging by throwing in a bucket of concrete, a rope, and a float.
Right, so that is really the question. Like, yeah, so you think that we're not and that we shouldn't be regulating those. I mean, the argument would really be that if somebody's doing anything that involves any kind of impact to bank or land underwater, so this would be land underwater that's being impacted by having a big concrete block sitting on it.
We're not talking
That-
about, a 2-ton block. A lot of times people are using a Clorox bottle. So I
Yeah.
mean, I think we ought to have some sensibility here about what's an actual issue and what really isn't.
Yeah.
I think it's already also covered
Is it?
under boating safety because as
Right.
you as property owners on the lake, you're only allowed to go out a certain amount of distance. Then it becomes the kayakers at a certain distance and then the boats, so everybody knows where they should be and shouldn't be. I don't know, like there's one seasonal float. It's a big unicorn. It's white. It's down at the other end of the lake, down at Jansen. But, there's swimming platforms. There's there's just a handful of them and two of them belong to the association. And everybody knows where those go. Like everybody knows where they're supposed to be in their own lanes. I don't think that I don't know. I don't think the Conservation Commission should be part of. I think the whole thing should be eliminated. I didn't think it belonged there either.
Wait, so you don't think the floats, buoys, and swimming platforms is what you don't think belongs there?
I don't.
Right.
I don't think so. I think it's already regulated by.
Well, what we're regulating just to inform, I guess, is the commission. These resource areas have particular things that we're trying to protect, and so in the case of the lake and in terms of floats, buoys, and swimming platforms, it would just be the lake bottom, which is land underwater. That's one of the areas that we protect. And so my only thoughts would be, obviously they are impacted by whatever weight is used. And then they would be, more impacted the more of these kind of weights that people start putting out there.
But, you know, if people are swimming, they're walking around on that mucky bottom. This,
That's
you
true.
know, I mean, disturbances happen. That's,
Yeah.
I think that it's inconsequential and we can probably accept that.
Yeah, no, I totally see where you're coming from. Scott and Bob, what are your thoughts on the impacts of seasonal floats, buoys, and swimming platforms?
I think anything that impacts something that is under the commission's jurisdiction is something that should be in our bylaw, and that could be uh you know a Clorox bottle or a naval anchor. Certainly one has an impact on the resource area that we've all taken an oath to protect, that pond bottom. So I think we are obligated to protect that resource. And this is one way we can do it, is by putting it in our bylaw.
Yeah, I tend to agree that just like we protect the aura, for example, if somebody's putting some kind of a relatively small structure or something, there's lots of areas where we're asking people to submit applications. And to me, this one falls in, it isn't less significant than some of the other applications we require people to do for different resource areas, is my thought. But Scott, do you have any thoughts?
Actually, you summarized it well, so I won't belabor it. I was in the same spot.
Okay.
How does this work then? I'm very confused because it says the commission shall, the commission shall review seasonal floats, buoys, and swimming platforms under a small project permit application. Is every homeowner who has a dock or a seasonal float, or I call them docks, but the swimming platforms, and so now the association has to apply for that every year? Like, how does that work? There's nothing, is there something defined? Like, I don't understand, because
I think it would be, at this point, I would want people who are deciding to put in a new float that they've never put in before, that they would be coming to us with an application describing what they're using, basically like the square footage of the weight that's going to be at the bottom, how they're going to get it out there. That would be what we'd be looking for. The grandfathered idea of people that have had them for a long time. I think we would probably not be requiring that, but that's something to talk about.
This is Miriam. Could I make a comment?
Okay.
Again, I'm trying to go back to the bylaw and what the definition of a small project permit is under the bylaw. And the reason why, when I drafted this, I didn't put a small project permit in, because I agree it would have been great, is that the bylaw doesn't allow you to permit work within a resource area. It's only within the aura. And it's the outer 50 feet of the aura. So a buoy or a float in a resource area, it can't be under a small project permit. I agree that, that seems like a reasonable thing. I'm not suggesting to put in like unnecessary burdens on people, but that was the reason, is that this is the way the bylaw was written.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose you could do it under an administrative approval.
It just doesn't make sense as to how, like, so if somebody takes it has a seasonal float, has a seasonal swimming platform, every single year they have to do this. That's, it doesn't, it doesn't make sense.
Right. Well,
and I'm not even sure what a seasonal float is defined as, and there's buoys that are you know, mark, everybody's allowed to go out a certain number of feet from the lake, I mean, from the land, in order to mark where the boats can and can't go, and and then the kayakers know that they go past, where the buoys are, and they have a certain number of feet, and then, like I said, then it gets to the boaters, but, anyways.
It is
just-
no, it is it is definitely a debatable question. I mean, it really comes down to, yeah, the amount of impact that we think they're having, but then also, like you're saying, sort of the, what are we gonna require? And it really would need to be built into the regulations. If somebody gets a permit, these permits typically a wetland permit is for an actual project. And so then it's good for 3 years, 3 to 5 years, so that they can get the work done. But in this case, this would be more sort of something that is again, an annual thing, a seasonal thing. To me, I think we could write a permit, if somebody came and said they want to put in a new swimming platform, and this is the size of the platform, this is the size of the anchor and all that. I'm thinking we permit that forever. It's a one-time deal. It isn't that similar from the seasonal docks. If somebody's given somebody files an NOI to put in a seasonal dock, they certainly don't have to keep resubmitting them every single year when they put their seasonal dock in. They get a permit that has conditions as to how we would like the dock installed every season, and stored off season, and all that kind of stuff is kind of included in their permit, and then they're done. So it would be the same for the swimming platforms. And if we can do it certainly under an RDA, that would make it easier.
I'm inclined to say, I kind of disagree. Okay, you've got something sitting on the muck bottom, which humans can walk on and dive and throw crap on and pick it up and all of that. So it can be disturbed in this whole zone. I think it's 150 foot. The buoys and even the dive platforms swing in the wind, so it's not like they're having a permanent impact like a dock might. And then you're telling, these residents that have had these things forever that now they have a new onerous requirement to get a permit at a cost.
Right.
I'm more inclined to say if you wanted to say GPS or set up some sort of database that shows where these things are for, I don't know, some future study or I don't know, to look at ramifications at some point, maybe do the administrative approval, and then you've got a record of where the things are. But other than that, I can't make my noggin think these things matter that much to
Yeah.
charge people and cause so much of a ruckus. It's a lot.
Yeah,
I mean-
I agree with the administrative approval part. I guess, the idea that I understand it's a smaller impact than the docks, but the fact that we're, making somebody do a notice of intent for a dock that also is seasonal and comes in and comes out, to ask for, the buoy and the float, it's just it's just a much smaller scale. But it can really be permitted the same way. But I think let's change small permit to administrative approval and see how that goes.
And are you saying administrative approval for any new installations, say?
It's similar to the seasonal docks. We're not going to run around right now and tell everybody.
So basically anything since 1987. That's where the starting line is.
Yeah, but again, I think with the docks, what we've been doing is is kind of only asking for the permitting when somebody's either putting in a new dock or they seem to come forward with some other project for their property. You know, we're not running around going house to house and saying, you have a seasonal dock. You need a permit.
All right.
So,
Anything that gets disturbed, the things that get disturbed at the lake and muck everything up are the boats that go around fast and fast and like the big boats, the boats that don't belong, you know, they belong out on the Connecticut River. Those are the boats that cause, and they're going very, you know, going faster than they're supposed to be. That's what stirs up the lake. If you get out on the lake and you swim out to the dock, you know, first thing in the morning, the lake is usually crystal clear because nobody's out there stirring it up. You know, I just don't see the impact that these seasonal floats, buoys, and swimming platforms have. I I I think people are just gonna be incredibly up in arms over something that I don't think is a problem, but I mean, is this new? Is this, I mean, I'm new to the commission. Is 10.4.2 new? Is it, or is it something that, like, what was the reason that this was brought in?
This whole section is new.
yeah, the
Okay,
whole section
okay,
on
that's the part.
docks is, yeah, it's new
Yeah,
as the
I
regulations in 2023.
Could I respond to that question? Because I wrote it. So you're asking a question I don't think anybody else can really answer.
Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. You know, I think that the thought process, and including this, was not to create a burden for landowners, but in the past, the commission did get feedback from the community sometimes about confusion about buoys and racing lanes and things that were put up on an ad hoc basis where people didn't know who put them up or how long they were going to be up for. And in the past, I believe in years gone by, the commission has given administrative approval for temporary racing lanes or things of that nature. I think the reason for having the commission know about it is not because any particular buoy is going to have a significant effect, but there could be a cumulative effect if people put up buoys and then they cut their lines and leave the anchors, for example. And so that's kind of, you know, leaving material in the resource area. Or let's say somebody wants to put up a 20-foot by 20-foot, you know, platform, which I know is an extreme example and is unlikely, but could plausibly happen. That would be something that probably the commission would want to know about because it would have the same kind of impact as a dock. I mean, it's not just how it's anchored, it's also the effect of shading and the effect on vegetation, things like that. So that, you know, I think, you know, you can figure it out how you want to do that, but that was the thought process.
I mean, people who are in boats in the middle of the lake, they camp out in the middle of the lake, they throw their anchor down. That stirs up the lake. Like, what is, you know, why they're fishing? And that's not being regulated. Like, you're talking about something that seasonally is being put in the beginning of the season and taken out at the end. Should we be looking at the fishermen who put their anchors down? Like, this just doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. I don't know what a racing lane is, and I don't see any definition of any of these things in here as to how that it even would be reviewed under administrative approval. But more importantly, I don't see a problem. Like, I don't see a problem with anything in these areas.
Okay, no, I understand kind of that perspective. And you know, it's it's left or right. You know, some people look at it as, okay, it is a resource area. It is land underwater. And we certainly are, like I said, regulating other resource areas for, sometimes it seems like some pretty small impacts, you know, buffer zone and everything else, but it's what's in the bylaw and it's what is in even the Wetlands Protection Act in terms of what are resource areas and we're supposed to, basically protecting them from even small scale type impacts. I guess
The
it's
sticky
sort of the way
wicket.
I look at it.
Beth, the sticky wicket here is that in front of any house, essentially it's a beach. Right? And any amount of human traffic in or out of the lake, anywhere, in a beachfront area, is going to cause a disturbance. Personally, I like to swim because I don't like my feet in the muck, but that's a whole nother matter.
Me too.
But you see what I'm saying? I mean, we're moving into a theater of absurd here by saying we're impacting the wetland resource, because I don't think we are in any long-term way. And you know that because if somebody's gonna reinforce their wall on the shore, you know, uh, they have to go to see if they've got any endangered species there, and then they have to do wildlife studies and so on. But we don't make people do that with their front yards that are lakes, you know?
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, I mean, I'm flexible about it. I guess, to me, it just, like I said, reminds me of some of the small things in the aura that we still require people to submit RDAs for. Something that when you see the work, you're like, there's no way that's going to have any kind of an impact on a resource area, but you still have to file an RDA because you're within the buffer zone, and that's just the way the bylaw and the regulations work. So I guess I'm not seeing why this small amount of impact that's actually to a resource area, and maybe it's just that my head just automatically goes to the regulations, and sometimes, yes, the actual bylaws and regulations, including the Wetlands Protection Act, the common sense kind of stuff may fall away, and you've just got these categories of like bank is a resource area, land underwater is a resource area, flood zone is a resource area. Any activity in those areas, you got to get a permit. And sometimes, like I said, the actual impact to any of those areas is extremely minimal, and it seems really silly that we're requiring anybody to file anything and pay any money to do whatever work they're proposing, but we still do it because that's what the law says, and that's our process. That's our lovely wetland permitting process. So I guess that's my argument about it is it doesn't matter in the end how small it can be. If we're doing it in other resource areas, we may really have to still do it in this resource area. But I see both Scott and Bob have their hands up. Scott?
Yeah, I think I'm looking at this maybe more similar to you, Beth. I think I understand the other argument that there are other things taking place, boat traffic and other things that may be more impactful, but that's not what this is. The regulations writing about it's talking about a resource area that is under our authority in the bylaw. I look at the same way that we have small impacts in auras and in resource areas on private land that we're permitting, and this isn't private land that we're talking about either. This is, the submerged lands under the lake that aren't owned by the adjacent landowners, I don't believe. And so I think having a process and to go through and to comply to ensure that there aren't impacts, I think is really our responsibility. I don't know that we could just say that we didn't want to do it.
All right, and Bob, you had your hand up.
No, I guess I would second Scott's that we have an obligation, just as all the other resource areas cited are regulated. It's our duty as conservation commissioners to regulate that. I think if you looked at all the surrounding towns that have this type of bylaw, they apply to all the resource areas, including swamps, bogs, rivers, and land under water body. So I think, and I'm arguing against my own self-interest here because I do have a pond float. I think they should be regulated.
All right, seeing no more comments from the commission. Tom Seaver, you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry.
Oh, no worries. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for noticing. Um, I had a few comments, and I'm sorry, the wait did make me forget on a few of my points. One of them is I'm on that boating and safety review committee, and these are on the radar, and I think they're going to become more present, the buoys, the floats, and whatnot. I just wanted to offer some correction on the notion of lanes in the lake or areas for kayaks or motorboats or whatnot. That's not actually what the bylaw says, and that's part of what we're clearing up as a committee. So I didn't want that to go on record as what is the case with our current bylaw about the distances where kayaks and motorboats are allowed. We are also looking at the effects of boats that churn up the water and might affect the shore or the water quality or other things. And how that relates to safety as well, the waves that they make. I did a lot of research because of an applicant whose application interested me a few years ago. And I just wanted to offer, it was very interesting to learn that very small pieces of matter put into the water did seem to matter to the state person who showed up, because I had made an appeal on a permit that was granted, or it might have been an RDA with conditions. And what's considered, in my learning, to have an effect or be permanent can be something that might only be a few months in the water and be very small, according to what I learned. So I don't know if that's very different from what people are already saying. But I also wanted to add that the boating and safety bylaws refer a lot to designated swimming areas and to moorings and to buoys. And in enforcing the law, it's going to be difficult if it's not clear what is a designated piece of matter in the water. And as far as we're understanding it, the designation largely comes exactly from Chapter 91 or from the town's approvals or other mechanisms for permitting and acknowledging the existence of these structures, because it could come into play for the distances boats need to keep away from those designated areas. And there's not really another mechanism to designate what is a private or a public swimming area, for example. But I think the key word in a lot of the regulations that affect how to operate boats and other vehicles on the water is the designation factor that comes from this particular talk you're having now. So I just wanted to offer that it might be important to include these, because they will also serve to help designate clearer for what then becomes a boating and safety usage beyond just the conservation impact on plants and light and water and whatnot, what you're looking at. If that's clear, I hope it is. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Tom. That's clear and good to know. That makes sense too, to me.
Actually, it isn't, because navigation and safety on the lake are not part of the values of the Conservation Commission. That's a separate animal.
Right, well, he's just talking about sort of, designating them as something, almost, having them have an ID. And if a buoy or something gets a permit with the Conservation Commission, it would probably, be associated with an address and have, some kind of a.
All I mean is it's kind of like a zipper or something. Like the two laws end up, or the two regulations, whatever they're called, they end up kind of forming a unit together that works for how the lake is used. There's no other way to designate a mooring or a dock or a swimming area than through Chapter 91. So, and those are the designated areas referred to in 320 CMR 12, or in Chapter 90B, sections 1 through 19 is somewhere where it is. So it's, as far as we can discover, they work in tandem, because we're referring to Chapter 90B for what we do. So Chapter 91 kind of gives the like embodiment of some of the mentions in Chapter 90B. But I don't want to, I didn't mean to get into like a debate about it. I just wanted to offer that I believe, I could be wrong, that it's going to be an important topic here about what are designated things in the water.
Thank you for that information. Miriam, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. So just as another point of information, the bylaw, the Shutesbury Wetlands Protection Bylaw, does have recreation as a value. So, you know, that's one of the things that the bylaw protects. So that's a factor for the commission to think about is, you know, what kinds of impacts projects have on recreational values. So I think that the reason why commissions include these kind of performance standards or regulations is to make sure there's some sort of orderly process and there's some standard perhaps conditions for how they get used. Again, you know, yes, you walk on the floor of the lake and you're stirring up sediment and you take out a seasonal float and you take the anchor with you, but you wouldn't want someone to abandon one of these structures and just leave it in the lake. Or you wouldn't want somebody to cut the anchor, which is what I was saying, and just leave the anchor at the bottom of the lake without removing it at the end of the season. We did have a complaint a couple of years ago from some residents who contacted the commission saying that they were unhappy or concerned about some, and I can't tell you what they were. I mean, they were described as racing lanes, but they were buoys, lines of buoys that were up, I think, in the middle of the lake that had been there for several weeks. And nobody knew who they belonged to. I think they were being used for water skiing, perhaps. But again, the idea being not so much that any one activity destroys the resource area, but there could be cumulative effects. And so having some standard conditions that you attach to an administrative approval, for example, maybe would be the best way to go. It was not, adding this was not meant to be unreasonable. It's just that the language of the small project permit in the bylaw didn't seem like it was appropriate. Thanks.
And did this language come from other towns that have, I know like Belchertown, for example, has
Yes.
in their bylaw and regulations, they deal with docks and buoys and stuff.
Yes, a lot of communities do. Definitely coastal communities do, but a lot of communities with great ponds have regulations around docks and buoys. And some of these definitions and terms are coming out of Chapter 91. So Chapter 91 has some definitions of what a water-dependent use or water-dependent structure is. And so this was drafted using the same language so there wouldn't be confusion between those two things in terms of the terms.
All right.
What would be the administrative approval? Like how would you review a seasonal float, buoy, and swimming platform? Like how would that be reviewed under administrative?
Well, just, you know, that you have some instructions on your website and somebody.
No, Miriam, I was asking Beth.
Oh, I thought you were asking me because sorry.
Administrative approval right now with our current regulations, the small permit is actually called administrative approval, but we're changing that to small permit application because administrative approval is something that's used by a lot of conservation commissions where so there's no form in terms of an application, there's no fee in terms of an application. They're submitting a request that's more like in the letter form, and the commission is allowed to issue basically what's called an administrative approval, where we're approving what's being put forward. In this case, we could basically have a few requirements that we would want information from them for.
And,
to
and what
issue
would
an
be a
approval.
reason for disapproval then? So if like, why would, if there's no fee, there's no, like, it's not clear what the requirements are. What is it? If you're saying that, like, for instance, if you go under, if it's too close to some other person's property, like, what would be the reason to reject it? Like, how would, if it gets approved automatically, then what would be a reason for it not to be approved?
Well, like, for example, say somebody, this seems strange, but say somebody wants to put out 3 diving platforms, and they're all 10 by 10, and as Scott said, that the bottom of the lake isn't owned by anyone, right? So they just put these off of their property. I think that right there to me is cumulative impact. It also has to do then, of course, with, in a way, permitting can help abutters and things. Like, what if people have issues with that situation? Somebody's deciding to put in, way too many platforms. We're the body that would look at that, and we would say, that has too much of a cumulative effect on the resource area, and we're only going to allow you to put 1 in.
Is there notice requirement then? Is there to abutters? I mean, what?
Not for an administrative approval.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I say we leave this language like this as is right now, but it's certainly something we can go back to and discuss again and think a little bit more about. How's that sound? We can move on. The commissioner. Yep. There's more against cumulative effects.
.4.7 maintenance of docks, piers, or walkways, or any portion thereof shall occur outside. Towards the end of that paragraph, we get into wooden structures. We may still have a wooden one or two out there that somebody might want to stain or whatever, and that makes sense to say do it outside the water area. But if somebody's just doing maintenance on a dock, like replacing bolts and whatnot, I don't know. My idea of what maintenance means might not be what is meant here. But do we want to define maintenance as application of paints or stains or preservatives or something so that that's clear, as opposed to just taking a monkey wrench out there and tightening stuff up?
Let's see, structural maintenance of docks, piers, or any portion that shall occur outside the resource area. If this work is done in a resource area, including the aura, the owner must inquire with the commission as to whether the work will require filing an NREA. Maintenance of a wooden structure shall not include the use of hazardous chemicals, cleaners, paints, or wood treatments. Ongoing maintenance conditions, if applicable, may be included in an order of conditions. So it does say hazardous chemicals, cleaners, paints, or wood treatments shall not
Right,
include.
but in general, most of the piers and docks that I observe aren't wooden anymore. There's a few wooden floats and stuff out there. And I get that part. So specifically for the wooden ones, yeah, yada da, that makes sense.
Hmm.
But for the ones that are not receiving any kind of paint or whatever, then maintenance winds up being they're tightening the bolts so the legs are the right height or
Mhm.
whatever. So there's different types of maintenance that I don't want to be included in that paragraph. You don't have to take your dock out to make the legs the right length, right?
Mhm. Um, I guess I'm wondering what types of maintenance would people be wanting to do when the dock is still sort of in the water or on the bank? Like you're
Well,
saying they would, just tightening of bolts and stuff like that, but I wouldn't think they'd be doing any cutting or, um, and the only other thing you think of really is the staining and the painting and that kind of thing, if it's wooden.
that's the greater concern, I would think, specifically that.
Yeah. So we could just include that, we could just say, um, staining, painting of wooden structures or any maintenance that involves the use of hazardous chemicals, cleaners, paints,
Hydraulics.
hydraulics, must be done outside the resource area. Would that kind of then allow smaller thing like what you were talking about, just like tightening things or, I don't own a dock, so I don't know what maintenance is for a dock. I don't know what you do.
There's not that much on the
Yeah.
newer ones.
Yeah. Do you wash them? Do you wash like, if they starting getting moldy or plants are growing on them, would you wash them and do people do that while they're in the lake?
I'm gonna guess no. I don't know anybody that's done that, which I can, there could be somebody out there with a scrubby, but I've never observed that.
Yeah. Well, and then we do have cleaners here in terms of, um, so yeah, I'm all right with changing that. Do other people agree that maybe we change this to just say, let's just see, we said just say maintenance of, doesn't even have to be wooden, maintenance of what are they called? Water dependent, what's the term?
Water dependent structures.
Water dependent structures. So maintenance of water dependent structures.
And hazardous chemicals, paints and stains covers it. I mean, that would include hydraulics if someone's messing with a lift.
Maintenance of water dependent structures shall not include the use. Maintenance of water dependent structures within resource areas.
Well, I stutter a little on that because we talked about this before when we were talking about docks. They're allowed to store them within the 50-foot of the lake, and that may be as far away as they can get. So, mindfulness really, if you're using something.
Um,
Not in the lake, not on the water. you know,
Maintenance of water dependent structures. We could say within resource areas other than the aura.
yeah. I think that's how we solved that before.
To non-use hazardous chemicals, cleaners, paints, or wood treatments. We can just say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Floats, docks, and boats must be stored in an area outside of the resource area, or a riverfront, and must be transported there without causing damage. Storage plan for docks should be included in the application. All right. That's the end of docks, piers, and floats. Here's where I stuck in limited projects. It used to be in the wetlands area in the BVW section, but I think it fits better here.
Beth, could you screen share?
I am screen sharing.
I'm not seeing it.
Is everybody else seeing it?
No.
Yes.
Oh,
I don't know why some people, I think I heard more than one no, but I'm not sure why. It's definitely being shared, so. All right, now moving on to what time is it? 9:17. All right, the next section we were going to look at is rivers. And then riverfront, we were going to try to get through tonight.
These strike me as a lot faster.
Yeah,
In other words, I don't have a list of things.
yeah,
The only thing, if you get to 7.1.3, I got a typo.
okay.
Zip to there.
I started at 7.1.2, actually.
All right, here we are. Rivers, streams, brooks, and creeks. Miriam, you still have your hand up? Is that just from before? Okay. So yeah, at least, okay, so which sections are you?
7.1.3.
Okay.
It's the third line. I had to read it 3 times to realize what my problem was. Snow melt and or stormwater runoff. Just add an or, yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else in the preamble from anyone? I had no comments.
I did. I had under, well, 7.1.2, I was looking for, I'm looking these things up as I go along. So H in 7.1.2, HYPORHEIC.
Yeah.
No, it's not, I mean, there should be a definition for that up in Article 2. And then under 7.2.18 should be defined in 7.1.2. So
So now you're in 7.2?
7.2.18, it says the hyporheic zone is the region of sediment and porous space. I think that should be defined up in Article 2, which is definitions, but it also should be defined under 7.1.2, because we get all the way to 7.2.1.8 to find out what the definition of this was in 7.1.2.
Right. Just move it
So,
up.
just move it up.
I
And,
agree.
Probably also the phonetic pronunciation of the term.
I'd love to know how to pronounce it too.
Me too. Yeah, no, I had to look that one up myself.
Yep.
All right, so it's first mentioned in 7.1.
So it's first mentioned 7.2.1.8, and it should be moved up to 7.1.2,
1.2.
somewhere in there, or ahead of that. But it also should be up in the definitions of, you know,
Yeah.
um,
First power.
like, yeah, right. Yep, exactly.
Okay. All right, anybody have anything else in the earlier parts of the definition section? I was fine with it all.
Under 7.2.1.2, I was also thinking that pole/rifle system should be defined as well, because I'm having a hard time figuring out that one.
Where is that? 7.2?
7.2.1.2, under, it's like halfway
Pools
through
and
the paragraph.
riffles.
Pools and riffles.
Pool,
Pools and riffle systems.
riffle. I'm sorry, I said rifle. What did I say? I can't see.
Yeah.
Riffle.
Don't we have a definition section in the very beginning of this, or did we do away with that?
Right. And
We
that's
do.
some of these things I already looked, don't have a definition.
Oh, and
That's
they're
what
not in there? Okay.
No, and that's why I'm like raising it, because I'm looking them up and I'm
Oh,
figuring.
good. Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah, no, I'm writing them down. We'll add them to the definition section. Yep. All right. Oh. All right. Streams. So in right here, they do refer to the definition section actually to help with sort of the definition of an
Right.
intermittent stream. And I'm wondering how people feel about this type 1 and type 2 for intermittent streams. I've never.
I actually don't mind that, but I do have a question because it comes out in the performance standards where it winds up confusing me. 7.4.3 and 7.4.4. The aura for a type 1 intermittent stream, the commission accepts and adopts the definitions, requirements, and performance standards for the inner 100 feet of riverfront area. And then for the type 2, it's the outer 100 feet of riverfront area. And I don't know what the hell that means, because I
Right.
thought that intermittent streams have a 100-foot aura, both types. So what the heck is an inner versus an outer?
Yeah, well, so I think I can answer that at least, is that they're referring to the inner and outer of the riverfront. So under the riverfront regulations, which would be for a perennial stream, you know.
Yeah, so
right?
that's a
It's called a
200 footer. Yeah,
So the 200 footer has an inner and an outer. If you look at the riverfront regulations, the inner is the first 100 feet,
right.
outer is the second 100 feet.
I get that.
So what is going on here is trying to say that there's two different types of intermittent streams based on how often they flow. And that what's being proposed, and I question it just out of sheer, it doesn't correlate with the Wetlands Protection Act. I find it a bit confusing, but I'm willing to, try. I don't know, we can talk about it, but what this is saying is that then those two different types of streams, one of them would be meeting the standards of that first 100 feet of riverfront, and then the second type of intermittent stream would need to meet the standards of the the stream that flows less, I guess you could say. The intermittent stream that flows less only has to meet the standards of the outer 100 feet of riverfront, which are less restrictive than the standards of the inner 100 feet of riverfront.
If
So
we're gonna, I get that, okay, I get what you're saying now, but if we're gonna keep it that way, then I think we need to use a couple more of our words.
make it a
So
little
that
more
when you,
clear.
so that when you read it, you get what's saying, because it's clear in there when we're talking about a river. You know, you got the first 100, you got your second 100 for the whole 200, but that wasn't clear to me that we were talking about the,
Yep. Yeah, we
you
can
know.
jump down there and take a look at it. Where is it?
I think it's 7.4.
There it is. 4.3 and 4.4.
Right.
So my one, more language, more description, make it a little clearer what's being proposed, definitely.
Because there's apples and oranges right there.
And one of my concerns, performance standards for the inner 100 feet so that what I don't get here a little bit is that if it is a type 1 intermittent stream, now we're basically taking the type 1 intermittent streams and I guess you could say treating them like they're perennial in terms of their standards, because the inner 100 of riverfront is the more restrictive zone of riverfront. So we're treating intermittent streams like they're perennial in terms of protection. And I guess, that's for a debate. That's for what people think of that.
So in the wetlands rules, the intermittent stream would be treated how?
Under the Wetlands Protection Act, any intermittent stream, which is, a stream that doesn't run all years,
Right.
ephemeral or
No
has
matter the number.
has a 100-foot buffer zone to
Okay.
bank. And bank is protected, land underwater is protected, and it has a 100-foot buffer zone. And it has an aura, the 100-foot is the aura. So it would be more under what we just went through the aura section. All the performance standards that are in the aura section are what would apply to the buffer zone of an intermittent stream. We're about right now to look at the riverfront section, which is a little bit different. And that's really been written to protect perennial streams. And riverfront is considered a resource area under the state regulations in itself. Whereas buffer zones under the state regulations are actually not resource areas, they're buffer zones. We've created the aura to be a resource area. So we have made it more restrictive already. And we have our whole section on aura. So there is a little bit of a difference between protecting the aura to an intermittent stream versus protecting riverfront to a perennial stream. It's regulated a little bit differently, and we'd be making it a little more restrictive around these types of intermittent streams, type 1.
I think that's a little bit tricky now too, because we've had some summers now where it rained from June 1st to August 30th. And, you know, the intermittent streams gushed straight through. We've had drought summers where they've been dry from June 1st, you know, basically to August 30th. And then we have regular years where, you know, it'll go dry for months at a time or not, you know, depending on the stream or the, you know, the flow there. If we start sussing them out as type 1 or type 2, I think that we're in a weird world now where it's going to be hard to categorize these intermittent streams through time. I mean, right now, the one down from me is behaving properly. But we've had a number of consecutive summers where it didn't behave properly, you know. And so at one time it might be a type 1, another couple of years it might be a type 2, you know. It's getting funky.
Yeah. That's a whole nother aspect to think about. You know, I was in Amherst doing the wetlands work for 8 years, and I would say it came up numerous times where people debated back and forth whether a stream was perennial or intermittent, and got out the official definitions, which is in the Wetlands Protection Act, and actually is very similar in our regulations here as to how you define whether something's intermittent or perennial. And people battle it. And one of the things that comes up is, say something's designated for a particular project to be perennial. Well, that definition goes away in 3 years when that project's done. So then somebody upstream or downstream from that same location 5 years later can come forward and argue it again. And there's a certain brook in Amherst that's just gone back and forth as its definition as being perennial and intermittent. And then you get groups of people who say, hey, wait a minute, 10 years ago, you made me treat it as riverfront. And now this my neighbor who lives, you know, you changed it, like what's going on? So it is tricky. There's pretty clear definition in the Wetlands Protection Act how to define whether something's perennial or not. But I get what you're saying is, in this case, if somebody comes to us with an application and there's a stream, whose job is it? I guess, is it their job to show us whether it's type 1 or type 2? Type 1, continuous standing water disappears for at least 5, but not more than 30 days annually. Type 2, standing water disappears for more than 30 days annually. Right, so somebody comes to us, I'm just playing this out in my head, somebody comes to us with an application and there's a stream on their property and they are going to go with type 2 because they're most likely looking for less regulation. Do we go out and look at the stream and figure out whether or not it's, you know, type 1 or type 2? Who's going to do that, I guess?
Well, and it gets tricky because, you know, a lot of times we'll faint back and say, well, you have to hire a pro to figure it out. But the reality is the intermittent stream below me is usually a type 2. But in odd years, it's been a type 1. So if I was trying to do something that year, you all look at me like I was crazy if I told you it was a type 2, because it'd be just the flowing by, you know.
Yeah.
So it might not be beneficial to have the two distinctions, although I get why you would want to have them if you have less onerous restrictions. It's tricky.
It is tricky. Unfortunately, I'm going to fall on the side of, I think this might be more confusion and work and everything for the commission than it's really worth. You know, it's hard enough regulating intermittent versus perennial. And now to jump it to almost 3 different types of streams to be regulating, I just see it as causing issues, but again, I'm willing to listen to what everybody else thinks. Bob, you have your hand up?
Yeah, this was a new one for me. I haven't seen the intermittent streams divided into different categories like that. And I think what you just said kind of highlights the trickiness of it. There are ways that you can calculate an intermittent or perennial stream through like stream stats, or the Lens Protection Act refers to the USGS map, you know, what particular type of line it is on that map. Um, and this would make it kind of tough for the also specifically for the reasons that Janice just mentioned, that from a year to year basis, it's very difficult to judge. So I guess I concur with you that we may just want to go intermittent and perennial rather than split intermittent into 2 different types of streams.
Okay. Thanks, Bob. Scott or Mayor, do you guys have any thoughts on this?
I have two thoughts. I'm in the same place with what Bob just laid out, and I also think it's starting to get late. So
I know.
at some point here, I think I'm gonna need to drop or call for.
Yeah. Well, once you get past where we're looking with, I think this is the crux of this section. So maybe if we can just get through river streams, we don't need to do riverfront tonight. We'll move riverfront onto our next meeting. Does that work for you, Scott?
Yeah, I need to drop off here at about 1:45.
Okay, yeah, no, I think we can do this. Basically this is a question area. And I think maybe I will try and potentially rewrite it where we're returning it back to just intermittent versus perennial. I
And
think that's probably
if
where
if we do that, that's fine with me. Then when we get to the inner versus outer 100 feet, where do we land? If we just have one?
that would disappear too. It would go back to me, in my opinion, it would go back to an intermittent stream that has a 100-foot aura associated with it, which is sort of similar to other resource areas like bordering, vegetated wetlands. You've got your wetlands and then you have your 100-foot buffer zone / aura.
Okay.
And then we regulate the aura as the section on the aura that we just went through. And then the other would be if you were actually in the resource area, and in terms of streams, you'd be if you're impacting bank or land underwater. We would be looking at that under the bank section and under the land underwater section in terms of impact. All right, I'll give an attempt to that. Miriam, you have your hand up?
Yeah, but just to let you know where that came from, there were several other communities that have this typology, but actually many of them have 4 types of intermittent streams, not 2. So, but if you look at like, language out there and about stream morphology, there often is a typology of perennial, intermittent, and ephemeral. So they break down intermittent streams into 2 categories, sort of an ephemeral and intermittent. Intermittent being a little bit closer to perennial. And the idea, like with a perennial, that the commission would make a presumption that would be then rebuttable. But if you want to simplify it, you certainly can do that.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for the history of it, where it came from. And I think I have seen the ephemeral versus intermittent somewhere. All right. So I'll take a stab at that. Let's see, the aura exists for both of them. No riverfront. Intermittent streams is a gradient hydrology. All right. performance standards, whoops. So I like how the performance standards are written. The commission shall apply the performance standards of bank and land underwater in assessing proposed projects for either perennial or intermittent streams. A river or perennial stream has an inner 100 and an outer inner 100 foot and an outer 200 foot riparian zone. I usually call it the inner 100 and the outer 100. Think about that. Protected riverfront, and then it refers to the, yeah, I think it says the inner 100 and outer 100 of the 200.
Right, but if we're gonna collapse those, we don't need that, right?
This is for perennial. This is for riverfront.
Oh, my
for
mistake, okay.
perennial, yeah. These two are the ones that are most likely going to go away.
We apparently passed my time to look at things.
I think this would go right now. Yeah, I'm gonna market that for now. Those are going. And then I do like the request for reclassification of streams section is good. This is how somebody who wants to argue whether it's intermittent or perennial can go about that. Comment created by Beaver Union evidence of harm. So because to deny change from, yeah. All right, I didn't have any other changes. Does anybody else have anything else within the performance standards?
Nope.
All right. I see something that you put in, Scott. This and some of the regs cited above may change. Oh, you're referring to the rainfall data. Yeah, it's true. I think this is what most people are referring to at this point, though. Should we put as amended?
Sure.
Database atlas.
I think Donna had some language.
I agree.
on that, right?
Or as amended.
I agree that to the
What was that, Bob? All right. I think that's as far as we're going to get tonight. Thank you all very much for everything tonight. Thought the CPA discussion went great. Our next meeting is February 13th. And I'm not sure when that CPA meeting is. I have to look and see. But if it's before that, wish me luck.
I think it's after Beth. I think it might be the 20th because I'm not.
Okay.
I wasn't able to make it.
Okay. Excellent.
If it's the 13th, let me know because I could make that.
Well, the 13th is our meeting.
I think that's our meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's our meeting. But all right, great. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
I motion.
Second?
Second.
All right, Con,
Aye.
Rowan,
Aye.
Fox,
Bye.
and Douglas.
Hi.
You were frozen for a second. Wilson, aye. All right,
Oh.
thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
You too. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.